Blow warm air. Have you ever heard a teacher use this terminology? Recently, I've been researching the role of air temperature in brass performance, and I have learned that many of the things I've been saying as a teacher and many of the things that I've believed as a player are not true. This video will attempt to explain and demystify air temperature as it relates to brass performance and pedagogy. Before we begin, let's define a couple of things. Temperature. Temperature is ultimately a measurement of speed. Temperature measures the speed or kinetic energy of molecules within the air. There are two temperatures you need to understand in order for this video to make sense. First is room temperature. Room temperature is usually around 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. I have an infrared thermometer here. I'll zap my room here and it says this room is currently 71 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty comfortable in here. The other thing you should know is body temperature. Normal human body temperature should be about 98 degrees. That's right, I'm 98.2 right now. For those of you who aren't on the Fahrenheit system, that would be somewhere around 37 degrees Celsius. So these two temperatures are two we're going to talk about as they relate to brass performance. Let's talk about the pedagogy of air temperature. Many brass players use air temperature as a pedagogical tool. For example, teachers may say things like, blow warm air, and that's often used perhaps to get a better tone quality. Some teachers are even more specific than this, and they'll say warm air or hot air for low notes and colder air for high notes. I've heard some teachers say fog up a mirror for low notes or blow out a candle for high notes. And certainly on the surface, these ideas seem to be cogent. If I blow on my hand, and you can try this at home, I certainly feel hot air on my hand, at least I perceive it to be hot air. And if I blow like I'm blowing on a candle, or like I'm blowing for a high note on trumpet, with a small aperture, my tongue high in my mouth, the air certainly feels colder on my hand. However, there are several problems with this way of thinking. My research on this topic began when I read an article that said that compressing air makes it hotter. Remember, temperature is a measure of speed, and when you compress air molecules, you make them move faster, which should raise the temperature. So for compressing air to play higher, wouldn't that make the air hotter, not colder? In other words, at first glance, it seems like we're exactly backwards in our reasoning about air temperature. But there's more to the story. This is actually a classic example of perception being different than reality. In other words, what really changes is our perception of the air temperature, not the actual air temperature. Let me explain. When we exhale in a manner that feels cold on our hand, that's because the more highly compressed air that's leaving your body mixes very quickly with the room air. In other words, your 98 degree air mixes very quickly with the room air, and so what you feel on the surface of your hand is more room air. It's more of that colder air, and it feels colder. Another explanation is that fast-moving air enhances the rate of convective heat transfer, which means it feels cooler. Just like a fan in the summertime blowing on you, the air from that fan feels cooler. On the other hand, with hot air, if we blow on our hand, like for a low note, where our aperture is big, it's slow-moving air, that slow-moving uncompressed air mixes more slowly with the room air, and what we feel on our hand feels hotter because we're feeling more of our body temperature air. Now pay attention, here's the really important part. The air leaving your body is the same temperature. We're always blowing hot air. If you are not yet convinced, here's a simple exercise to prove this point. Because the perception of temperature on your hand is influenced by the way your hot body air mixes with the colder room air, what if we prohibited the air from mixing with the room air by blowing through a cylinder? Take a sheet of standard paper, fold it up like a cylinder, and blow through it. you'll feel it's very hot on the hand. It's not mixed with the room air at all. In fact, it feels hotter. Feels substantially hotter this way even than when I'm fogging up a mirror. It feels very, very hot. In fact, I can feel the paper itself getting hot from all this hot air I'm blowing on it. Now let me try to play like a trumpet player and blow through a small aperture with an arched tongue to blow what I might perceive as cold air, like that. Try this at home, and no matter how much you think you're compressing the air, no matter how cold you think you're blowing the air, it's always going to feel piping hot, 98 degrees-ish, because that air is not getting a chance to mix with the cold room air. So in other words, we are always blowing hot air. Let's talk for a moment about warming up. A cold instrument, one that's been sitting unplayed, like my trumpet right here, usually is going to be about the temperature of the room. So let me take a quick surface temperature measurement with my thermometer. 75 degrees. I played it a little bit ago, so maybe it's a little bit warmer than room temperature. And when I blow my 98 degree body temperature air into the 75 degree or colder trumpet, that instrument is going to probably play flat and unsatisfactorily. Remember, temperature is a measure of speed, and pitch is a measure of speed. Two conclusions can be drawn from this. Number one, before an instrument will play in tune, the instrument itself needs to be warmed up. In other words, the player needs to blow some body temperature air into it for a period of time. Number two, proper placement of the tuning slide position should only be established after the instrument has been warmed up. You know, some players feel like it's not necessary to warm up, and when they say, I don't need to warm up, they're usually saying, I think, their lips feel okay, that they don't need to play long tones or scales before they feel ready to play. And maybe that's true. But even if you don't feel like you need to warm up, you need to warm up your instrument. You need to blow some of your 98 degree body air in the trumpet in order for it to play properly. Lastly, it's not spit, it's condensation. My good friend Ryan Beach, who's been my colleague in the Charlottesville Opera, has a podcast called It's Not Spit, It's Condensation. And he's right. When water vapor in our exhaled breath reaches the surface of our instrument, water vapor droplets come together and gather on the inside of the instrument. What we empty from our water key is mostly condensation. So in summary, here are 7 key takeaways about air temperature. Number 1, the exhaled air leaving the body is always near body temperature. Number 2, an unplayed instrument will take on the temperature of the room, which is often much colder than human body temperature. Such an instrument should be warmed up prior to performance. Number 3, cold instruments tend to play flat, hot instruments tend to play sharp. Number 4, perceived changes in exhaled air temperature are merely an example of perception being different than reality. Number 5, students do not have the ability to actively change the temperature of the exhaled air. Number 6, teachers who instruct students to make changes to the exhaled air temperature for pedagogical reasons are saying something that is scientifically impossible or incorrect. Lastly, number 7, physical efforts to change the temperature of the exhaled air may result in unwanted tension in the body. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in my blog post. I hope this video has been helpful for you, and I hope it fills in a void on a topic that we talk about all the time but don't have a lot of access to a lot of research. I recently did a search on the International Trumpet Guild website through the ITG Journal Index. In about almost 50 years of the ITG Journal and ITG newsletter, there have only been 2 articles ever published on the subject of air temperature. And both of those articles are very narrowly focused on the topic of air temperature as it relates to intonation. Like we've said before, hotter air makes you play sharp, colder air makes you play flat. I've found no articles in the ITG Journal or any other journal I've looked for on the subject of the pedagogy of air temperature and the value or risk, the truth or fallacy of saying blow cold air for this purpose or blow warm air for this purpose. In summary, we're always blowing hot air. We're always full of hot air, quite literally. And we have to be very careful and correct in our language if we're going to give someone the instruction of to blow hot or cold air for some pedagogical purpose. Because in truth, we're always blowing hot air. On the screen, I'm going to include the URL to my blog, jasondovel.blogspot.com, where I'll provide some additional information, take a deeper dive into this topic, as well as provide some links and resources where you can read a little bit more further on this topic. I hope this video has been helpful for you. I hope I've helped explain and demystify this. And so have fun playing your brass instruments. Keep using that hot air.